Welcome to episode 2 of the My Warped Life podcast. I'm sitting here with my friend Tony Alarato.
What's happening? I'm here.
How you been, Tony?
I'm good. This weekend, my wife put me to work. She made me sand and repaint, and I'm exhausted and achy and tired, but I feel super macho.
Well, that's good to hear. And I was out in the desert visiting some friends, just traveling around in the van. And it was a nice time catching up with people,
Not so hot out there right now.
No, got to catch up with my friend Paul Tollett, who started Coachella, and went up to the high desert with a good friend of mine, Steve Jones, who was in a band called The Unforgiven, went on to be a jouster in the medieval times and at the Renaissance fairs.
Oh, that's awesome. I love
He's
that.
been a stuntman, and he's been working on many reality television shows. So this episode 2, we talked a little bit in the first episode. The food kept coming up, or lack thereof food, which naturally led me to think about this next episode, how we should kind of expand on that, and what would be expanding on this episode without featuring my good friend Shelleylyn Brandler. Shelley was the founder of TaDa Catering, and we're going to learn a lot about her in this episode. We're going to bring something else up with this episode that was kind of legendary. And Eileen Groby, who was working with me on sponsorships and marketing on that tour. And we're inviting our first artist onto the show outside of the first episode, Fletcher Dragge, the famous Fletcher, which we'll probably have episodes on him. I was thinking there might be a whole season on Fletcher.
No, there should be, because I got clips of this interview, and I'm like, oh, my God.
And then we're including an interview. As I said, we talk about charities or people that give back. And I came across this guy named Robert Aronoff, and we're going to talk about his journey and how he's stepped up to help bands as they tour and hit the road. So are about ready to get into this episode too.
I mean, it's great that you brought this one up. And I know it doesn't seem like it's important, but it's so important. This episode about food. Food changes people's attitudes in life. If you have good food, things are good. If you have bad food,
and it looks like we've both eaten a few bit of good food over the pandemic here, Tony. I know we've talked about both having to get in shape if we're going to videotape this thing.
The pandemic has not been good for me.
No, it's not me either. I've been eating very well at home. So, well, let's get into this first part of this thing. Shelleylyn, I've actually known since she was 17 years old. She grew up out in Laverne, and I was growing up in Claremont, and she would tend to drift to parties that she probably shouldn't have been at, and I know that was. And then, later on in life, I'd get a call from her mother going, is Shelley over there doing her homework at your house? And I'm like, that's a trick question. It was Shelley was off in Hollywood dancing at some of the clubs around L.A. and hanging out in L.A. And then sometimes she'd be coming and knocking on my window going, hey, can I crash here and tell my mom that I fell asleep while I was doing my homework? But Shelley and me grew up, and as I started working at events and shows, Shelley started working as a PA.
To go back in time a little bit, in the 90s, I was first a runner and a PA for you, and we had a lot of fun. And I don't remember what year, but it was like early to mid 90s. You, Kevin, got a job with Lollapalooza. And I was at that time working a lot of jobs for you all over LA, running or being a PA for the punk shows mostly that came into LA at that time. And you were going to go on tour with Lollapalooza. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because although I had a lot of side hustles working, I definitely was counting on, working. I mean, at that point, at least 6 to 8 gigs a month with you. So it was a pretty good little steady hustle. And I found myself getting a job at Woodstock in New York. And then I ran into you there at Woodstock in New York, and you were with Porno for Pyros.
Yeah, I forgot. That's right. I flew up there. We were out on Lollapalooza, and we flew up to do the event and crossed paths on that muddy day, that muddy, rainy day, if I remember correctly.
And you were really stoked, and I was doing press. I landed a job doing international press. They were overran, and they needed some extra help, and it was a fun little gig for me. I didn't start off going there to do press. Do you remember you got me a job with the caterer that you used to hire in LA? the brother.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
Chuck and Terry.
yeah, and I got fired.
Shelley liked to work. Shelley was, she was a great worker.
Right.
And we weren't partying. I mean, we were working, like I said, 320 shows a year, and Shelley was, her job pretty much was like, band needs guitar strings, drive to Guitar Center. Band needs component. Well, she'd drive to Fry's, which sadly I just heard went out of business.
Yes,
and I'm like,
did.
so many people. That's where we got all those little things that you could never find in a second. You couldn't, Amazon, great.
They had everything.
But Fry's, you could fix anything and have a show
right.
that night. So I worry about that in some ways. Like, that's where we used to get things. And then, as we went, it was interesting because, we mentioned Chuck and Terry here. They also switched over to be some of the first time we toured with catering on Warped Tour. And they used to travel around in this truck. And I'd give them like $10,000 a day to feed us. But their truck needed like $4,000 a day, $5,000 worth a day of equipment. So
what did you eat then?
Well, for a long time, I thought salad only consisted of iceberg lettuce.
Yes,
without
does.
Iceberg, nothing.
That's it, iceberg.
I
don't know any other lettuce that's out
one
there.
day, like a tomato ended up in there. No, but nothing. We're talking iceberg. We're not talking like iceberg with peppers and cucumber. It was iceberg.
Right.
And that was the dinner. My wife would come out and she would like, oh, this is so good. And I go, well, we've had that for 5 days. It was like a slice of bread with like some chipped beef and cheese on it. She likes nacho cheese. And she'd go, this is so good. And I go, that's probably the 5th night we've had that in a row.
So how does this lead? Obviously, I can see the tendencies of not being happy, but how did she, going from doing promotions and runner, how did it get there?
Let's check out what Shelley had to say about this.
So we were starving backstage, and it was a good day if you got a stale bagel at catering, and it was far and few in between good meals. And I really had the big idea God, if I could just even start a catering company, I could do better than what I'm seeing here.
No, it's interesting. I mean, she immediately saw that it was bad. What were you doing to your people, Kevin?
Well, we were trying to figure it out because Warp was always a lot of people, and catering budgets on a normal show can get very big very quickly.
Right.
So we were trying to manage this, and Chuck and Terry, I give them props.
Was this the first year?
No, first year we didn't have it. That's when we had nothing. Second year and third year, we kind of brought Chuck and Terry.
Right.
And Shelley had come back to start working, was working out there. And she started to identify, and she actually started to do some local catering.
I started throwing parties, and I started getting really into food. And the people that would come back to my parties would say, wow, you're like the urban Martha Stewart. And my only background in food really was working as a waitress. But I had a flair for making things look good. And I had a girlfriend who loved to cook, like a home cook. So her and I would get together and, everything from making our own salad dressings to making our own bread and throw these parties. And people just kept saying over and over how good we were. So then in 1998, before 1999 tour, you were off tour. I came to visit you in your Claremont offices. And I somehow, God bless you, Kevin, I feel like I talked you into giving me a shot to cater in 1999 with my girlfriend.
Now the truth is, she probably came to you and she perceives it as really trying to talk you into letting her do it, where you're thinking, I'm not going to pay for this goddamn truck anymore. Let's let the girl have a chance.
Well, at that point, I had to do something. I had to try anything. So, why not? Shelley's a friend. I know she's going to work hard. She's going to give it all. So, I said, sure. Like, sometimes I'm busy and I go, sure.
Wrong?
Yeah, at this point, what could go wrong? And, it
looks like it turned out.
And this became, she had this company she had as a partner. It was called June Rose Catering. And let's hear a little bit about how it all started for her with actually touring catering.
I saw a niche on that first Warped Tour that we did not have good food backstage. We actually were, kind of left out. I was thinking to myself, like, here's these artists. Why are we not getting better food? Like, isn't it the fruits of their labor that we're here? Why are we not serving them something like at least healthy, not a stale bagel or dried chicken? Like, it was bad, cereal boxes.
It was the Warped Tour weight loss program.
Yeah. That 1999 tour was such a learning curveball. First of all, we had an all-girls kitchen and really understaffed. We had like 9 people. And for the first year, that was and no locals. So we were doing everything, doing the dishes. And our motto was, we don't have to do a big variety. And you actually kind of talked to us about that. But what we do need to do, it has to be good. So we had to make our own homemade salad dressings, or we used to make those pizzas on the grill, and everything we did was good. But we had a lot of help from all the bands on that first year in 1999.
Yeah, and there's not many tours that you would ever be involved in where the bands would actually come in and help out.
Like Jack from TSOL used to clock in everyone. Back then we had like a punch hole and a card, and you would get a punch hole for each meal that you ate. And you would do so many, your hand would actually be like frozen, like the punch hole, like holding a punch hole. Like it was horrible. So Jack would come in his kilt and stand at the front of the line and check everyone in. We would have like the Bouncing Souls peeling potatoes for us or helping washing dishes. We had the Black Eyed Peas lending us their like toaster and their blender from their bus. Like it was definitely like a really group effort to make us succeed,
That is so cool. I would go to a concert if I knew that I could hang out in a food line with the headliners of the has that happened anywhere? How do you get the bands?
It was interesting. It was the evolution of the community of Warped Tour. And I always was about kind of, even those 12, 13 years I was doing shows, how do you engage everyone so they recognize that the other person is as important to the process as they were? Some people would say, it's true. You look at the headliner band or everything, but every component of touring, is important. And I think people recognize she's out there trying, and she's out there in the same elements they were every day. It wasn't like you come into a venue, there's a caterer, they go home at night, you go. These people were traveling. Like
it was gypsies. It was live and die by, I think the truth of it, though, is you're kind of a smart promoter where you got your bands to help out with the food. Come on, that's brilliant.
Well, they got props, I definitely recognize, and we'll talk about later about set times and different things like that. But, you definitely got...
So you got props. So, like, if you helped out, you got good set.
Not officially, but, through time, people got
brilliant.
People got recognized that supported the community.
How cool is that? But, I always hear stories about the tour and how it really was a traveling band of gypsies, and everybody had to help out. So, it makes a lot of sense.
I think that was a common thread. There was many times, if I was going by and the guy was out there sweating at 125 degrees, just cooking chicken breasts were like big. I said, there, you stop in and help him out.
Right.
And it's part of, a technique of working. If a boss can jump in and help and not, you'll get the respect of the people around you.
Sure.
And that was always my thing. I came from those places of doing everything. So for me, it was just kind of natural. If someone needed help pushing a case across the parking lot, if someone needed, was struggling with something, just run over, help them a little bit. Someone needed to tie down their tent. People would recognize that. And
that's why you see Jeff Bezos on the Amazon working line all the time. He's there boxing stuff up. I can see that.
To understand. Yeah, I'm sure Jeff's over there. Wow.
No.
I got the one box that was packed upside down. I think I got his stuff. So she had June Rose Catering and with her friend that was locally, and then they worked together. And then Shelley broke off and started TaDa Catering.
I started TaDa Catering in 2000 and went out on tour with those mobile kitchens. And then I think by like 2002, we built my own kitchen. We had enough money. Chris Nord did it. And we built a kitchen that really kind of allowed Warped Tour to kind of evolve into like a friggin' beast. Like a couple years in a row, we were feeding 1,000 people backstage per meal. Warped Tour is my baby. I really teethed on it, got my baby teeth out and my big choppers on with Warped Tour. It was a great way to learn how to do really good food that had integrity in a parking lot anywhere you put me. Like sometimes I'd be in a dirt field. I'm like, Kevin, this is not okay. I can't barbecue in a dirt field. It's against health. Like it was crazy. And, working with Warped Tour and growing with Warped Tour and being able to feed people in such a short time, like we would have, 21-day runs. And we'd wake up at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., whatever the call was, and have like a continental breakfast going, make your own egg station, go into a full-fledged lunch, always trying to be, feeding all the different dietary, to then closing down and then feeding a dinner. And we would order like $10,000 worth of food, paper goods, drinks, whatever we needed. It was a massive amount, pallets and pallets and pallets of stuff. From fresh fruit to meats, like one serving of mashed potatoes, we would need 350 pounds of potatoes. That 350 pounds. That's like 2 human beings worth of potatoes. And then the butter and the cream. So to carry this food, it was a big undertaking.
Wow. That's a lot of people. Now, back then, this is like 1998, 99. When she says she built her own kitchen, we're talking about like what food trucks we imagine are today?
Well, it was bigger than a food truck. It was a semi-truck.
Oh, wow.
It was a semi-truck.
Well, for 1,000 people, it better have been a day.
And she mentioned Chris Knorr, which I'm going to thank people during the show. Chris was an unsung hero of Warped Tour because he was a truck driver and worked on many other tours and things. But he saw that we needed something like this because we were, working out of trailers. We were trying to make everything work. And he said, hey, I think I have an idea on how to design and build this thing.
Wow. So this was a custom design of someone who was on the tour knowing what the needs were.
The needs were. And this came out, a lot of things came out of this tour. And we'll talk about some of those later episodes, especially transportation and things. A lot of stuff was developed out there. And, one of the things is trying to keep track of people eating. And Shelley developed a system that was the barcode system.
Do you remember we really had to figure out how it could even be possible? Like there was a couple key factors that made it happen. And learning and growing was the barcodes. The barcodes. Yeah, we were the first tour ever to assign a barcode to a person ever, anywhere. And we had that crazy genius. I hired this kid from Austin, Texas, who was either going to be a independent, wealthy billionaire coming up with software or run away with a rock and roll band. So he kind of did both. He started off with us, and then he developed that software where it was a barcode. It could tell you what band you were in, what you did for the band, what your meal was, and how long you were on a tour, all on a barcode. And we had that little computer system that would help us. So that helped us a lot. That was a key factor. And then another key factor was getting people to help us because we would have to schlep so much gear from A to B. So you came up with the baby bands, getting baby bands to help us carry our gear and set it up and have it up on time and then back onto the bus trailer.
Okay, 2 things. The baby bands, brilliant.
They weren't babies. There wasn't child labor laws.
Chip in and help. And then 2, the kid that she had help, it's amazing. You probably didn't get any money for this either. That was probably Mark Zuckerberg, where he got the idea of Facebook on the Warped Tour, and you got no money for that either, right?
I know that Robert did pretty well in the software business, so I know he did pretty well out there.
Who is it? Who developed?
That was Robert, and he was the guy that was super, super smart, but you never know who's going to want to end up on the road. And he ended up out there, and he saw something that needed to be solved.
Right.
Because we used to have to write it out. They used to have sheets of paper and have to cross your name off, and you're trying to go through in alphabetical order.
It makes sense. I'm sure people are still using it today.
Absolutely. There was a part of this that was really interesting because we were trying to be an early eco-friendly tour.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a time that we said we're using all this plastic utensils. Because washing silverware, because unfortunately people throw silverware away. Have you ever noticed at your parties, like you put out nice silverware and it still ends up in the trash? Like it's just people's. So
no, not at my parties, Kevin. I don't know what kind of riffraff you have coming around your house, but not at my parties.
Of course. But you lose a lot of stuff like that. So they were using plastic, and I said there has to be an option. And this is like when some of the biodegradable forks start coming out, or some of these things made out of cornstarch or potatoes.
You've always been environmentally conscious, but that's a big part of it.
One of the things Shelley did was we tracked Cisco Cisco, the large institutional food company, we help them integrate this into their catalog.
We even got earth-friendly paper goods before everyone was doing that across the United States. They were using styrofoam. We really pushed big companies to carry earth-friendly stuff.
As we got to this point, Tony, where, when you're touring with people, have 12 bunks in a bus.
Right.
And I think we'd have spun off at a couple catering people travel with other. We were traveling with somewhere between 13 and 14. They would hire some locals, but Shelley liked a variety of food, even though she says I kept a limited number. There were so many choices of food out there. It started out that we were just having good food.
Right.
Then, of course, you wanted to spin into vegetarian. And she started with vegetarian options. And then all of a sudden, we're traveling with a brilliant vegan chef that was cooking vegan meals. And then I finally had to draw the line because at one point, towards the end of the tour, I think 2017, I was kind of frustrated and over it all around at that point, just for many reasons. And people go, what are the 25 reasons you had warped? And normally they go, he wasn't making money. I go, no, there was money. And this is one of the 24 the main reasons was I'm standing there one day and a band member of a band. And at that point, to be honest, Tony, there were so many people on that tour and they were younger. I wasn't traveling with my friends anymore. They were kids out on the road. I was like their mentor.
These kids and their rock and roll music.
I was like,
get off my lawn.
I was like their mentor or disciplinarian. That's pretty much my role out there. And this guy walks up to me and he's like, hey man, where's the gluten menu? And I go, whoa. I go, gluten menu. And I look at him and I said, where did you hear gluten-free menu? It's like we've got vegetarian, we've got vegan, we've got 2 forms of protein every day at every meal. And he said, oh yeah, it's in my contract. I said, I'd like to see a copy of that contract because I'm pretty sure gluten-free paper's gluten-free. I'm going to make you fucking eat that contract, okay? Because I was so pissed. And we had to draw the line at that point. I was like, are you kidding me? We've got another gluten-free menu. Isn't grass gluten-free? But I asked him if the contract would be, and I was going to feed it to him that afternoon. But, one of the cool things that evolved, because you needed, you couldn't have all these people digging into food. There was still...
Look, there's got to be a line that you draw on this end. And ultimately, your responsibility is to put on a good show. And you got to feed people. But no, I get it. The frustration.
But she wanted to keep everything clean, and we had portions to give out. You couldn't just let people, because people will tend to overfill a plate. They always do. We were trying not to throw away food. So, if we ended up with extra food at the end of the night, we always gave it to a charity, rock and wrap it up, or someone would take it, or there was always someone to eat the food.
Right on.
But one of the things that evolved was, at each meal, one of the people that worked for me would go out and recruit 12 to 13 people, fans from the audience that would like to serve a meal to the bands, their favorite bands.
Okay, so that concept, if I could go and serve a meal to one of my favorite bands just to volunteer and help out, I'm down. That's so much fun. Did they get to eat with them too? I mean...
Well, they would give us something to eat, but the cool thing is they were always got to pick a band that they wanted to go watch from the side of the stage.
Oh, that's awesome.
But this really evolved into something else.
We had so many bands help out, but as catering grew, every little thing needed to be served. And we would do not just a vegan entree, we would do a meat eater entree, or we would do a vegetarian entree. And then each one of them had a butter and it got to the point where it wasn't just a band helping out, and every band from every level, the headliners to the baby bands, we had every single band help out. We started getting kids. And it was a big mentoring thing. We started getting kids back there. We'd give them a little spiel, you volunteer and you're going to not only serve alongside some of your favorite bands you're here to see, you're going to see all the bands come through catering to get their food.
I'd walk backstage sometimes, and you said kids, but there was also some other people that sometimes would be back
there. Parents. Yeah, we would get like parents and kids alike to come volunteer. But Kevin, what was so crazy about that? We would have the repeat customers year after year. So then you get to these kids that say, I want to do this every year. So you go to Chicago and you get the same kids and the same moms or the same dads. And they're like, I love it. This is the favorite part of Warped Tour. And they'd be working in catering, not just their little shift to volunteer, but they'd want to hang out in catering for hours. You know, it was a really super cool thing for some people.
So that would go from city to city too, right?
Well, the kids wouldn't travel from city to city with us.
No, but from one Chicago, there would be a whole different new kids that could experience
in
this.
Indianapolis. And then it really kind of evolved into this thing where there was parents that came to the show. And now the parents could either maybe go to the reverse daycare center or they might walk around and see the bands. But Shelley integrated it became like Warped moms and dads that would come and help in catering all day.
That's awesome.
And I'll never, like, there was a mother and daughter that would come, and I think it was in St. Louis, that I don't even think they went to the show. They just came down to help. I'd go in there and they're just washing dishes and things, just being part of the crew that day. Where people always wonder what a day backstage is like.
I wonder if that is even a possibility today, to legally do something like that. If there's
Do you think it was legally possible back then? Didn't really check
You're
with anyone.
Wild man.
No, we just, it was safe. We didn't give them sharp objects.
Yeah.
They were given a spatula and said, give someone a scoop of peas or carrots.
Awesome.
Don't give them both. Give them one. So they hand one.
And I'll bet that made things more efficient too. I mean, you had a lot of people to feed.
We've been talking a lot about food, Tony, but it's now time for
the great food fight.
The great food fight? Why, Kevin, what could you possibly mean?
Well, this happened on one of those days off we want to talk about that I was always trying to do something nice to people. And usually my production crew.
I mean, this is when the story gets much better. You were trying to do something really nice, actually fantastic, something I've had some bosses in my life do something really cool for me in my past, but this is where it gets weird.
So this is where I'd like to bring in, two people that were integral, a part of this fight, even though one will deny it. He was just an innocent victim. Let's hear from Eileen Groby.
Well, it was 1999, and it was my first year working for you full-time. I had worked for you. We'd created the Bernie Ball stage and all that, or, when I was at ASCAP. But this was my first year working for you. I was so excited, and I really wanted to plan an amazing day off for everybody, that we were going to be in Oregon on the Rogue River. And so I worked really hard. I researched, like, all right, what are we going to do? We're going to river raft. We're going to have dinner. So I worked with a travel company and booked us all these rafts and a really nice dinner at this restaurant on the river. We had about half of the restaurant.
So this is in lieu of you saying, okay, guys, we're working hard. We're gypsies. Everybody's serving food. Everybody's pitching in. But you got like all these rafts for these kids to get on the river and go have lunch or something, right?
Yeah. So it was kind of this thing where it was like you could just go get a hotel room. A lot of times on tours, they'll get you a hotel room and buy a mall.
Right.
That was let's go to the mall. And I'm like, I don't go to the mall at home. So my motto was, let's try to
make it normal.
Let's try to like you're normal. You work really hard on all these people, and it's summertime. So let's find an activity for everyone. So not only did we have some rafts early in the day, but these were actually jet boats, like big on the Rogue River. No, big 60-person boats.
Oh, wow.
That like got airborne, spun 360s, and it's super fun in the rapids of the Rogue River.
That was a good time. It was expensive, it sounds like.
Yeah, I was spending some money, and I got the bright idea to invite a few bands. So, I had invited Ice-T to come because he was traveling with us, of course. But I invited Pennywise with us. And people have to realize at that point, I had the freestyle motocross team that I was working with. I called them the Flying Diablos.
Right.
They were more like the Flying Assholes.
They're really good.
They were kind of like the Flying Assholes at that point. But the Flying Diablos were that group. Went on to be like amazing people. Carrie Hart.
Take the good with the bad.
Brian Deegan, Carrie Hart, Larry Lincoln, like household names within the world of freestyle motocross. Right. And so the concept was that, we would go up the river. We'd go under this giant aluminum pavilion, like a big picnic. You're out in nature.
Yeah, it's nice.
And you lined up and you got all your food, and they put like the ribs or chicken or whatever you wanted And then it was like family style, like beans and mashed potatoes and salads and pitchers of beer and wine at the table. So you think that it would all go like a nice evening. However, if you don't know Fletcher, you have to picture a guy that like, Chewbacca and Jabba the Hutt. Like Chewbacca, he's as bigger than Chewbacca. So picture Star Wars.
Right.
And average person's Luke Skywalker.
Right.
And then there's Chewbacca.
He's a big guy.
I mean, everything about Fletcher's big. Like, I'm 6'1". Whenever I'm with Fletcher, it's like tiny. Like, I feel like I fit in the palm of his hand.
So would you say he's a big and sort of an intimidating guy if you were to meet him first time?
Oh, yeah. Fletcher could be quite intimidating.
Probably not to El Diablo, though.
Well, he's great. I mean, you know what? It's like we just like, we had a lovely relationship, me and him. We went way back to the early into the Golden Voice days.
Cool.
And the way I met Fletcher was we had a show down at the Shrine Auditorium.
Right.
And Pennywise, it was their first big show. Right. And someone warned me. They said, he's going to cause a little trouble. And I said, well, no, I'll have to deal. And when I got the writer for the band, that's the what comes through. It's like it was like, we want 10 cases of beer. I'm like, well, the budget doesn't leave for anything else. He says, fine. So I got them 10 cases of beer. And we met that night because I told him that if he causes any trouble, I'm going to hit him. And
how big is this guy?
I mean, he's like sick. I don't know. Fletcher's like 6'8". I was 6'8". And sure enough, pandemonium.
Only second show, Kevin.
I know. I'm getting my words right.
Second show.
Pandemonium broke out at the show. I'm trying to use big words just instead of shit broke out at the show. And I ran up and hit him.
No.
It didn't even flinch. He was just like,
Did you really?
I kept my word. But like in one fell swoop, though, it was one of my best drop kicks of everyone off the stage because one of his friends was running up to get into the melee. And I spun and I kicked the guy off the stairs. And it was so cool.
Really?
It was like one of those like total moments. Like you just did it.
You clock the guy. Like me, I would slap the shit
with him,
out of him
you
for
clock
sure.
him and it bounces off. Like you just, with Fletcher, it's like the guy's indestructible.
Right.
And we'll be talking more about his indestruction.
Cool.
But somehow when, out of 120 people, someone's going to be in the middle of it.
I'm sitting there. I think we stuck some beers in there as well. And we were at the same table as the motocross guys. And I'm going to say that they started this food fight because I think like maybe Hart or Linklogel. It was like Hart, Linklogel, Ronnie Feist, Sink Mars, Kenny Watson, that son of a bitch, who was like the team leader. Always smart ass.
You had to check there because we both know that those guys were wilder than most bands we've ever met.
Yeah, they were. They were on our fucking bus every goddamn day. Like they'd either be getting stoned or having a couple beers before they jumped, or in between jumps or after jumps. Like the Pennywise bus was where you stopped by for some rum and cokes and a couple, bong hits in the back lounge with Byron.
Before they did backflips on their motorcycles.
Yeah. I mean, why not? I mean,
okay.
It enhances your skills. I heard, but I mean, I'd rather be drunk or stoned doing that shit than sober because I'd be scared to death.
Well, it sounds like prison rules. It sounds like the bikers decided, let's find the biggest guy in the room and punch him straight in the face straight away. Yeah. And I'll bet that's what started the fight.
Yeah, that's the one where you want to check, like, was that legal that these guys would drink beers and smoke pot before they jumped off a motorcycle? And Fletcher, of course, the innocent, like, the
innocent, most biggest guy in the room immediately became the target.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're sitting there, and I think a couple, pieces of corn got tossed over at me. I think it might have been Linklogel. Like, just like a couple little, warm-up tosses of, goofing around and fucking poking the bear. And I think he knew what would probably come of it, but he kept doing it. And I was like shaking my head and I don't think we had eaten a quarter of our meal at this point, and everyone had just sat down and it started pretty quickly. And then I was like, I think I got one too many, maybe got a little lump of mashed potatoes or something tossed at me. And I remember Byron was pissed, boy, but I just remember picking up, I think, a handful of mashed potatoes or something and just throwing it at the motocross in the motocross direction. I don't remember. Yeah, you were gone. Civilians are getting hammered, and like tough dads are getting up wanting to fight us. And like, any guy that got up was like, "Hey, you motherfuckers!" They got a fucking corn on the cob to the head.
I remember standing up screaming like, "Oh my God!" I was horrified because I was the one that was in charge. I'd planned all of this. I was so horrified. Total food fight. People are hiding under tables. And Carrie Lee's yelling too. She was so mad. And I ran off to find, because they wouldn't listen to me. I ran off to find you. And I was like, "Kevin, it's crazy. You have to come back. These guys have gone nuts. There's a huge food fight." You were like, "Oh my God." You came back, you start yelling, "Stop, just stop it, you guys. You have to stop." And then you were just so enraged with these guys. Like, I can't take you anywhere. I can't take you to any nice places. You guys are just awful. I mean, you were just, it was
probably a little more blatant words than that.
Yes, exactly. Maybe this is a family show, so I'm not.
Yeah, no. So at this point, I came like running up, and we're trying to quell it. And as we started to say, it's people started drifting out. Like it was like people saw me and were like, "I better get out of here. I don't want to be left. Like I don't want to be pinned on this." So people were like scurrying down to the boats, like out of the building. And standing in the middle of this because
they didn't want to go to jail.
Well, no, there was no jail involved. They just didn't want to get pinned with it because me being mad at you probably was worth. Jail was probably the safe place at that point. So what ended up happening was it's like everyone scurries and it leaves this little group of people that were so into it they didn't even like know I was there. Right. They were still just like mid mashed potatoes and scraping up stuff off the floor, and it was just. And then
it was bad.
It calmed down. And at that point, there's a couple of varying opinions of how it went down. And then I'll tell you how it really went down. So let's hear how it went down.
They finally stopped, and you really gave them all a talking to. I mean, it was all these, they were basically little kids like, "Sorry, Dad, sorry, we suck. And you remember you saying, "These girls worked so hard to put this together for you, and you just ruined it. And oh, sorry."
I remember you coming back, and then I remember the walk of shame. Like, it's like Dad has arrived. I mean, we're pretty much the same age. He might be a year or two older than me, but like, you're always the father figure in this situation, and I'm like the 8-year-old that's in trouble, and we all are the walk of shame. And I remember like getting yelled at by you and Eileen and whoever else was there, like
Carrie Lee was there.
like walking down that hill back to the boat. It was like just head down, just tail between the legs. Like, fuck, we fucked up again. We ruined the whole day out. I mean, I'm telling you, I did not start that ship, but I definitely finished it. But it was like, yeah, it was not. And the boat ride home, oh my God, that was like, I hated the boat ride home. I mean, like, it's the perfect, when do you get to have a food fight in a place with 500 civilians are surrounding you? I mean, yeah, it basically had to happen so we can have this conversation now. And I mean, look, like food fights are shit is something that happens in a high school cafeteria, more like a grade school cafeteria, like
movie
in movies. But we've been in some food fights growing up as kids. It happens at birthday parties and whatever. Like it happens, and I guess it's like a testament in a way to how fucking immature we all were, and how literally like the Warped Tour was like a playground for kids that were into punk rock. And it's kind of awesome that we could have moments like that where we get to just be children. I mean, the fucking whole Warped Tour was being children, including you, the big boss, behaving like a child many times.
At times, absolutely. Those will all come up at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you have to do your job, but like you were basically running a giant, daycare center for a bunch of drunk children, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, that memory was just a fucking great memory. I mean, the walk of shame was not that fun, but just having that, that memory in my memory bank, like I said, the Warped Tours contributed some of the best memories and summers of my life. Literally, like I never went to summer camp. We weren't summer camp kids, so like the Warped Tour was like my summer camp.
We get everyone back on the boats, and I send the boats kind of like we're getting ready to load up, and I look around, and there's these kids all had summer jobs, and
right.
and I have always been leave the place better than you found it. And this one was going to be tricky to figure out because, like, at a concert, we could do a cleanup. We could leave something behind, some canned food to help with the community. But this one, so I looked at everyone and I looked for my tour accountant at that point, and I said, how much cash do you have on you? And he said, I have $10,000. I said, give it to me. And I walked up to the hostess or whoever the manager of that evening. I mean, everyone was like 14 years old that ran the place too.
Right.
It was like it was like going to dinner in Salt Lake City. The average age of the person waiting on you is like 12. It's weird. But they all work hard. And I'm like, all right, I 100% apologize. You can get back to me if there's any broken damage or anything we need to fix. You have a credit card, but here's $10,000.
Get out of here.
No, I gave him 10.
You gave him 10 grand.
I said $10,000. Split the money amongst yourself to clean up because
So one of two things is happening here. Either you're overgenerous and the most wonderful person on the planet, or they really fucked that place up.
No, it was guilt. There was a lot of guilt there. There was like, I can't believe Warped Tour. That's my name, and I had that many times. I go, there's bands when they're on their own, they can take the heat. They can stay. If they get in trouble, it's them. But it always came back at the Warped Tour.
Oh
so so I gave them the money. They were always like, cool, food fight every Saturday. Like, it was like, okay, we're good. And
so what were the bands that were there?
Well, I mean, it was an assortment, but I didn't really have a lot of it. There was Ice-T. There was
Ice-T
Blink
was there.
Ice-T was with us, traveling on the bus, and I knew that giving that money back. Don't worry, Tony. I knew I could get it back, which I did.
Sure.
I was paying the motorcycle guys per diems and paying them to be on the road. I was paying Pennywise. I just divvied it up and probably made an extra couple on the back end for my trouble. I probably collected $12,000 in fines.
Oh, I see.
So it always worked that way. It's like if you had 10,000.
Are they aware of that today?
Well, there's a couple stories about that, But for my trouble, my time in trouble, my day off got ruined, right? So the Warped Tour like sorted itself out a lot. It wasn't like, we knew that eventually a band would impose a self-inflicted penance.
Something that always had to be done after we did some damage was to take care of all the girls that are running the show. I don't remember exactly who was all running the show back on that particular date, but we always wound up buying chocolates, flowers, Starbucks, or whatever we could do. We'd send a big care package and a little apology note to the front office, just to be like, hey, we're sorry, we fucked up again.
So this is not just in reference to the food fight.
It was kind of this ongoing
thing.
And trust me, the whole production office were awesome women that worked for me. So like they knew how to play the guilt on these guys. Like it was just like they were like shunned. Like it was like if they put the shun word on someone or the shun look, like that just was infectious. So people wouldn't even there was no free rum and cokes there was no takers for the rum and cokes on the Pennywise bus for about a week.
Yeah.
You just didn't want to see them. You didn't want to be around them. But you know what? There was this thing, and one of the things I said I always say was a mentor of mine was a guy named Ice-T. And I learned a lot about Ice-T. And this next part of it really kind of made me feel really good about the ending of all of this.
We were sharing the bus with Ice-T and his crew that year. And we're all in the bus, and Ice-T was actually chatting with us, and they come in the bus with flowers and wine, like big things of Gallo wine, big jugs and flowers, and like a Bath and Body Works basket for us, saying, you guys, we're so sorry. We suck. You rule. And I remember Ice-T going, what the hell is this going on? Metal Magnolias? It just really was like, oh my God, you guys are not men. You're little boys. And we're sorry. We're sorry.
And isn't it, it changed from jugs of Gallo, trust me, to later on in the tour. I saw bottles of Veuve Clicquot being dropped off. Maybe people were making more money. They were touring. Or maybe their taste had grown. But back then it was like a gallon jug of Gallo.
Oh, that was
got
cool.
you a long ways. But before we wrap this little segment up, I want to pull a couple comments off of our Facebook page because I did ask people to talk about food. And this one came from Michelle Ponce, who worked on the tour and for many years. She said, I remember that food fight. Out of all my memories, I remember you went to the bathroom probably 5-7 minutes, felt like an hour. The motocross dudes and Fletcher exchanged pie and mashed potatoes. Evil E's girl was across the table. Her chest gets hit with mashed potatoes. Ice-T tells me, hit the deck, under the table. Carrie Lee is standing up trying to stop it, but it goes way out of hand when chairs go flying, and every word she says gets her blasted by another pot of food. What a great memory. Always wanted to be in a food fight, and that got off my bucket list.
Nice.
I'm glad I was able to check something off your bucket list, Michelle. And on another note, this was from Mary Borgino, who was actually, this was her first tour, and she was working for Steve Van Doren and the Vans crew.
Right.
And they were all at this event. I was at the food fight. I remember we took rafts there. Ice-T and his crew had a huge water guns and were doing drive-bys on the way. When we got there, I think Fletcher and one of the motocross guys started the fight. Michelle Bonte, Nolte, Becky, Botti, Christy Van Doren, Batson, and I hid under the table because we knew if we participated, Steve would fire us. So
was Steve there?
Steve was there. And, it was one of those things where I think it's like, if we're a jury right now, because you might have to sit on a jury, who's probably guilty of starting this food fight?
We know it was Fletcher, right?
We'll leave it to the jury. All right. But on that note, I did just mention, a guy named Ice-T, and he will be an ongoing theme of this podcast, because I always say you have a few mentors out there, and I don't know if he knows that, but he was a mentor of mine, but he was also a great mentor to Shelley.
I would come and talk to you or run up and down the bus. And one time, and this is 1999, and I walked on the bus and I was doing something, getting paperwork or getting money or doing something. And Ice-T sat there and he said, Shelleylyn, the finest ass caterer on the west side with the driest ass chicken. Oh my God, what did he just say? Gee, you can't mean it. He said, girl. And so from that day on, I've never had dry chicken. That was like, I one and done, was told once and made sure it never happened again. So that was a really funny story. And do you remember how he used to always say, you got to pimp past it?
Yeah, I got to pimp past it. There was a couple terms that he would say. It's funny when I try to say that in class now as a professor at USC, sometimes I'll go pimp past it, that, if there's a lot of clutter around you in life and you see something you have to get to, that's pimping past it.
Yeah.
It was
just make it happen. It's, you just got to make it happen. That actually became the motto in TaDa Catering when I brought Chef Mike on in the early 2000. The motto was make it happen. Like, you just had to make it happen. Cannot serve food late.
Yeah, so that's really what it was. And Shelley developed it, but she talks about a couple other things before we go with her today. She talked a lot about her lasting relationships, and I think you'll enjoy this section.
I keep in touch with so many people on that tour. You make soulmates on Warped Tour. Definitely make soulmates. Who's the band that had the jet on Warped Tour? Offspring. I'm having such a senior moment. I can't remember bands' names anymore, but like Dexter and I still text. I mean, the guys, from NoFX and I still text. Like, Fat Mike will always be one of my best friends, no matter what. Like, when you have those bonds, you're just going to have those bonds. The Bad Religion guys, so many bands, like, the thing about Blink-182, like, I'm like friends with them, and Travis used to have us like cater his like Thanksgiving. He had a TV show for a while, and I did his like TV show Thanksgiving and Christmas, and the Hoppises, Mark Hoppus, he has me do like private events at his house. These are like bonds that you will like always have. Matt Skiba and I, he comes to parties at my house. There's so many people and so many stories that I have made true friendships with that will probably last for a lifetime. Joan Jett, oh my God, love her so much. She will always have the special place in my heart and our connection. There's so many people.
And these are relationships that she's built over the years that, like she said, soulmates, but her business is directly affected by these relationships from warp year over year. It's grown exponentially. She's doing really great.
Oh, absolutely. Pre-pandemic, and I'm sure post-pandemic, no one's going to stop, but she ended up picking up the Coachella Festival. She's done festivals like Firefly at one point.
But did you say Staples Center too?
She does Staples Center.
That's
she does
big
the
time,
Forum.
Man. Yeah.
She does the Hollywood Bowl. She does
great.
the Greek. She does that 5 Points down in Irvine.
And how much money are you getting out of this? None.
You know what? We have had some wonderful catered dinners at our house.
I kid.
It's all about relationships, Tony. It's not just about money.
Why do you think I golf with you, Kevin?
Absolutely. But it's one of those people that, she definitely has led a warped life. It wasn't, there was no pathway for her. Literally, it's
awesome.
She flowed, and identifying opportunities, capitalizing on those opportunities in a positive way. And we're starting to hear that word, hustle coming up, hustle. And I always say there's hustlers and then there's hustlers. And the world I ran into was the actual hustlers, the people that went out and created opportunities for themselves and built businesses. And
well, I could tell she was a hustler in that moment in the interview and in her life when she realized, coming off a promotion and, buying strings at Guitar Center, she had only to find a bagel backstage. And she says, wait a minute, I can do way better than this. And that's what it said for me.
Sometimes it just starts with a stale bagel. So, with that being, talking about stale bagels, our next guest, Robert Aronoff, is an interesting person because he is a fan. And I want to bring people on that do good. And so a lot of times that'll be a nonprofit or something. But I was really intrigued by Robert's story.
And then, of course, I've always been kind of a food guy as well. I take a lot of pride in the cooking that I do. And I asked them about, I said, have you had any good Texas barbecue? And they were quite honest and said, we haven't eaten anything but Taco Bell for 2 months. And I said, come on. So I took them out the next day. They had a day off. I took them out the next day for some barbecue, and it started a conversation. And the next time they were in town, they kept in contact with me, and I had them and other bands over, and it just kind of expanded over time where, I would bring food out to the venues. I would set up a big tent behind their buses and vans at Warped Tour. And I would bring enough food to feed as many as I could all day long. And after a while, I started getting contacted by a couple of bands that I didn't even know that, I obviously had heard of them, but I had no connection to them. And I've had a good dozen bands over my house to give them a place to sleep, to let them see something other than a parking lot, to give them a chance to shower and do laundry. And I think those four things are like the big things for them. A place to sleep, a place to do laundry, a good meal, and then just not seeing a parking lot. This is one of the loves of my life. I've made what I consider to be lifelong friends with some of these bands. The thing about this situation is, there will be a band that I've become close with that's been in my house a number of times, and they'll have friends in a new and upcoming band, and they'll contact me and say, hey, we've got our friends in this other band. They're just starting out. They're coming through Dallas. They could use a place to stay. They kind of know that it's automatically going to be a yes from me, and I'm going to look after these younger bands.
Yeah. It's as simple as that sometimes for people on the road. There was a couple things he pointed out during that clip was, that they only ate Taco Bell. The one cool thing that Taco Bell was doing was they had identified that bands needed food. So that when a band, they made relationships with record labels and agents and things. And when a band went on the road, you'd get a stack of like $5 coupons for Taco Bell.
Right.
I don't think Taco Bell thought it was there to replace the food totally.
Right.
Because you would expect that
in a pinch you can do Taco Bell.
Taco Bell's
Fine,
great. But a lot of times these bands
not every
now,
day.
When you go play in a club, I hear that, I used to work in the clubs, and we'd get a buyout for food. We'd take a per diem and we'd go eat. Well, that buyout in many clubs has actually gone down or equal to what we used to get in 1983. So that dollar doesn't go even close to what we were able to buy. We could buy a meal for $10. We could eat maybe 2 meals off of $10. You can't get a sandwich for $10 now. So bands, staying healthy, we talked about in eating on the food. So it took people like Robert, identified something and what he was willing to do to kind of give back to the community.
One of the things that I've learned from doing this is that when you start feeding large numbers of people, especially in those communities, in those music communities, you're going to come across some dietary restrictions, right?
Oh, no gluten.
So early on, I'm bringing up, beef ribs and brisket and pulled pork. And then all of a sudden I'm realizing there's some really amazing people that I admire, and they're really not able to eat much. So it's forced me to kind of expand my cooking range. And, I've spent time developing recipes that I could do on a large scale for vegetarians.
Lovely. Yeah.
I do a barbecued cauliflower that I did for Travis of Mayday Parade. I developed a beet salad for some of the folks that I know that tour with Coheed and Cambria. Nice. And so, that's one of those things that's just kind of grown on me, is that I've realized I got to do more than what I knew in order to satisfy everybody in the community.
I wonder if he's been thrown out of Texas for that, actually, because, you would expect nothing else. If anyone remembers anything, you'd ever go to South by Southwest and be so excited for the barbecues, but after 4 days, you were like,
I think it's a chore listening to the first Warped, and as you grow with the tour year over year, and how important it was for you to make sure that your crew and the bands and all of that were healthy and fed well. It's an important thing, but it's a second thought for a lot of people that come to these shows. And when you think about it, food and water is probably a primary, right?
Absolutely. And we'll be exploring water in general. I think the subject of water as one part of episode will be quite interesting.
Oh, cool.
On how that involved. Well, I think, I want to thank, everyone who came on the show
let's
today.
Wrap it up, Kevin.
I think it's about time.
That's your segue.
About time to cut out of here, and look forward to episode 3. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode. Thank you for all the comments so far. Share your craziest warp stories with us on our socials. Stream My Warped Life podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to know when new episodes are released every other Monday. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at My Warped Life. If you want to hear all of the stories that couldn't fit in the episode, make sure to follow us on Patreon at My Warped Life. Also, you can text us. Text questions, comments, and stories to 818-863-6445. That's 818-863-6445. All of these links are available in the description and on our website, mywarpedlife.squarespace.com. If you have great photos or any memorabilia, please post it on our website and tag us at mywarpedlife to see your photos and comments featured in an episode. Thank you to my co-host, Tony Arathia, and my producers, Xavier Bradley and Vivian Wang. Original music by Diego Arathia. Art by Carly Webster and Sierra Lyman. Social media by Beata Shemtov. And an extra special thank you to my inspirations, Sabrine and Fran Lyman. Now play us out of here, Diego.
You're in love with me. You're in love with me.
Does that have a collar on it or no collar?
No collar.
That's
Is this your
Carlos? Cat? Yeah, that's Carlos.
It's just a stray in my lap.